Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're sinking gently into the soft, smoky nightmare of 1600s Europe. A time when a bad harvest, a dead cow, or your neighbour's sudden rash could all lead to the same conclusion. You're a witch, obviously. The air is thick with incense and paranoia. People speak in scripture and side-eyes. And if you're a woman with opinions, unfortunate timing, or an herbal remedy that actually works, well, congratulations. You've just become everyone's favourite scapegoat, no broomstick required. So before the Inquisitor knocks or the villagers find one more reason to fear your garden, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy calmly narrated tales of slow systemic horror. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's tuning in from around the world. Now take a deep breath and settle in, because tonight you're the accused and there's no such thing as a fair trial. You weren't always suspicious, once you were simply inconvenient. You spoke too plainly, you laughed too loudly, you didn't cry at the funeral and someone noticed. You have a sharp tongue, strong arms, and no husband to whisper you back into silence. That already is enough. The world prefers its women either quietly obedient or softly dead. You are neither. And so, when your neighbour's baby falls ill, fevered, wheezing, limp like wet cloth, the town doesn't ask why. It asks who. At first it's just a murmur, a glance that lingers too long, a conversation that stops the moment you walk into the bakery. People who used to nod now cross the street. The cobbler's apprentice stops calling you ma'am and just stares, and the midwife, who once sat at your hearth drinking beer and cursing men, suddenly won't meet your eyes. These things alone could be coincidence. You try to tell yourself they are, but then you catch your name, spoken low and sharp like a knife under breath. Not your full name, of course, just her, the way you might refer to spoiled milk or a stain that won't scrub out. Your goat hasn't helped. The damn animal howls every night, like it's being murdered by spirits, and you haven't had the heart, or frankly the coin, to butcher it yet. You're the only one who can get near it without being kicked. Naturally, the village interprets this as proof of our unnatural influence. And when it starts bleeding from the eye, a mundane injury from a bramble, you're sure, the whispers become more pointed. Someone says they saw a strange light in your window. Another swears they heard you speaking in tongues, though it was probably just you arguing with the goat again. Either way, it spreads. No one asks you what happened. They ask each other. They ask the priest, the mayor's wife, the town drunk, everyone it seems, except you. And the thing is, once a whisper starts, it doesn't need evidence, it just needs repetition. Like a song with only one lyric, played over and over again until it becomes truth. She always had a strange look about her. Didn't her mother die young? She walks alone at night. These aren't facts. They're memories reshaped by fear. People rewrite your life in real time. That kindness you showed the old beggar last year? Suspicious? That time you helped birth a breech calf? Unnatural? Your herb garden? Dark arts? Your freckles? Devil's kiss? Your literacy? Definitely the devil. You try to laugh it off at first. You've survived worse. Poverty, frostbite, 2 stillbirths, and a drunk who used to call himself your husband. A few idle rumours? Please. You've scrubbed blood out of linens with less effort, but paranoia has a flavour, and soon everything tastes of it. You start noticing how often you're alone, how many doors close a little faster when you pass, how silence blooms around you, like mould on bread. You keep your head down. You bake your bread, tend your garden, speak less, smile more. Not that it helps. Fear is louder than facts. The more innocent you look, the more clever they think you are. It's a game you weren't told you were playing, and it's already too late to win. Then someone gets brave enough to say it aloud. It's the blacksmith's wife, brittle with pride and short on reasons for her own misfortune. Her youngest child has taken to fits, screaming, thrashing, babbling nonsense. A fever, most likely. Or a tumour. or grief over a lost sibling, because this year has been unkind. But instead of admitting that she's helpless, she gives the town a gift, a name, yours. She doesn't shout it. She just tells the priest over soup, quiet, reasonable, like she's doing you a favour. I'm not saying it was her, she says, while spooning turnips into her mouth, but she's not like us, and ever since she brushed the child's hair, well, you have to wonder. The priest, to his credit, tries not to look interested. He mumbles about prayer and God's will. But later that night, he watches your cottage for longer than usual. You don't know about any of this, of course. You're home, feeding that cursed goat, burning your fingers on stew, and wondering if you'll have enough firewood for the next frost. But you can feel something shift in the air. Not a storm, worse, a turning. People begin to speak to you with a strange, careful politeness. They smile too widely. They nod too quickly. One woman actually curtsies. It's the same way they speak to graves. You realise that they've already buried you. Now they're just waiting for the paperwork. One day, you step outside to find a bundle of twigs tied in the shape of a crooked figure left at your doorstep. No note, no explanation, just a crude symbol, damp with morning dew, as if whoever left it still half believed you'd turn it into a toad. You stand there for a long moment, holding it, letting the cold sink into your skin. Then you throw it into the fire. The flames spit and curl, and for a second, just a second, you think they hiss your name. A week later, the miller's daughter starts coughing blood. She's pale and shivering and terrified. You bring a tincture of horehound and honey to the mother, but she doesn't answer the door. Just stares through the cracks in the shutters as if you're death with a shopping basket. You leave the bottle anyway. She pours it out in front of her neighbours. They applaud. You know what's coming. You can feel it like a splinter under the skin. Not fatal yet, but deep, infectious. You consider running, but to where? The next town would greet you with the same suspicion. And being a stranger is just another kind of guilt. So you stay, and you wait, and you listen as the whispers thicken like smoke. They're not asking if any more. They're asking when. It starts, as these things often do, with a meeting you're not invited to. A gathering of concerned neighbours. Concerned in this case, meaning frightened, self-important, and possibly bored. The harvest has been poor. A cow gave birth to a stillborn calf. The blacksmith's son broke his arm in a fall that was entirely his own fault, and yet somehow none of it feels like coincidence anymore. They gather in the church hall, which smells of old wood, damp wool, and unresolved tension, and they begin to talk. Not about solutions, about suspects. They don't say your name immediately. It comes up gradually, like a boil rising under the skin. Someone not quite right, they murmur, lives alone, talks back, keeps herbs in glass jars like a sorceress. And then someone, probably the same blacksmith's wife from before, with the kind of smile that hides teeth, says it, says you. And from that moment on, you aren't a person anymore. You're a possibility, a problem, a puzzle to be solved by righteous indignation and terrible logic. They begin to compile a list, not of crimes, but of vibes, things that felt strange, things that feel strange now in retrospect. The time you argued with the mayor's cousin, the time you didn't attend the saint's feast because you were bedridden with a fever, or so you said, the fact that you've never remarried, that your hands are calloused, that you never seem particularly sorry about anything. Someone brings up the salve you gave them last winter, a mix of beeswax, marigold, and yarrow. You spent hours grinding it, boiling it, praying it would ease their child's rash. It did, but now, that's suspicious. It worked too well, they say. Smelled unnatural. And wasn't it strange, they add, that the rash disappeared after just one application? No ailment goes away like that unless someone's made a deal with the devil. Your independence is held up like a bloody shirt. You make your own decisions. You tend your own garden. You have no man to oversee your actions or temper your words. You know how to keep accounts and how to read. That last one is particularly damning. After all, what business does a woman have knowing how to read? What would you even use that for, if not forbidden books and secret rituals? And then there's the cat. You found it mewling behind the market stalls last spring, underfed, flea-bitten, the colour of ash and soot. You fed it. You gave it a name. It follows you now, as cats tend to do when not treated like trash. To the villagers, this is not a sign of kindness. It is proof. Familiars, they mutter. Witches and their animal companions. Next thing you know, they'll say the goat is your husband in disguise. You notice the change in how people speak to you. Or more often, don't. Their eyes flick over you, like you're a smudge on a window they'd rather ignore. When you speak, conversations stall. When you pass, they turn their backs. The children start calling you hag when they think you're out of earshot. You're not. You just stopped correcting them. There's no use arguing with the tide. A man spits near your feet at the well. When you glare at him, he mutters a prayer. You remind him you once stitched his wound when he drunkenly fell into a fence post. He doesn't reply, just crosses himself and backs away, as if your glare alone might curdle milk. The priest visits you. He doesn't come inside. He stands in your doorway, arms crossed, face blank. He says, "There are concerns." You reply, "There are always concerns." He does not laugh. He suggests you attend Mass more regularly. You mention your aching knees. He suggests prayer might heal them. You ask if prayer heals gossip. He does not appreciate the sarcasm. The funny thing is, you've always been useful. People forget that. You delivered their babies, sewed their wounds, mixed their teas when the coughing got bad. You knew when to use willow bark, and when to use honey, when to boil water, and when to let it cool, when someone needed a tincture, and when they just needed to be held and told it wasn't their fault. You were never thanked for these things, but for a while, you were tolerated. Now that tolerance is gone, burned away like old straw. All that's left is resentment for your knowledge, for your confidence, for the way you held yourself just a little straighter than you were supposed to, for the way you didn't flinch when men raised their voices. People remember slights you never delivered, words you never said. They remember you being cruel when you were only tired. They rewrite every interaction to make you the villain. And in the story they are telling now, the villain must pay. You see it in the market. The fishmonger shortchanges you. The butcher pretends he's out of meat, even as a fresh haunch drips behind him. You drop a coin, and no one helps you pick it up. You're invisible until someone wants to stare, and stare they do. A group of boys starts following you when you walk to the fields. They don't say anything, just walk a few paces behind, kicking stones, whispering. You turn and they scatter, but they're always there again the next day. You catch one spitting into your garden when he thinks you're not looking. Another snaps the head off a sunflower. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. They're just boys, but you know better. There is a moment, late one evening, when you stand outside your door and look up at the sky. It's clear, wide, streaked with the pale light of a waxing moon. You used to find comfort in it, the same moon that watched over your mother and your mother's mother, stretching back through time. Now it just feels cold, watching, like the rest of them. You turn to go inside and for a second, you think you see something carved into your doorframe. Just a mark, a symbol. Faint, like someone scraped it in with a nail. You rub at it with your sleeve until your arm aches. The mark doesn't fade. You sit by the hearth that night, long after the fire's gone out, and wonder how long you've been burning without noticing. You've been watching this unfold like someone trapped behind glass. They talk about you, not to you. They gather at corners and cross themselves when you walk by. They avert their gaze like your eyes might hex them. You used to think this would pass, like the seasons. But now, for the first time, you know it won't. Because now there's paperwork. The first sign is the arrival of a man on horseback. He wears black, because of course he does, and he's flanked by two assistants, who look like they've never smiled. Dust clings to his boots, but he does not dust them off. He lets the filth announce his travels like a badge of honour. His name is never spoken casually. It arrives with titles, with reverence, with discomfort. The magistrate, that's how they say it. Like a final bell toll, you do not greet him. You watch from behind a curtain as he enters the church hall and speaks in low tones with the priest, the mayor, and the wealthiest landowners, people who have decided, without your input, what you are. You recognise the look on his face, bored authority, the kind of man who doesn't believe in witches but very much believes in procedure. He carries more suspicion than facts and more confidence than sense, and that combination is more dangerous than any torch-bearing mob. The next day, a boy delivers a notice to your door. The paper is creased and smudged, written in a careful, legal hand that makes even your name feel accusatory. You are requested to appear for questioning. Requested as if you had a choice, as if this were a polite invitation to tea, rather than the first rung of a gallows ladder. You read the notice 3 times. You already know what it means, but you hope that reading it again will soften the words. It doesn't. You wonder who else received notices, if they call everyone in, or just the ones they've already decided are guilty. You think about burning it, about pretending it never came, but you don't. That's the kind of thing a guilty person would do. So you go. The hall smells like wet parchment, old sweat and damp wool, the kind of place where fear has settled into the beams. You're ushered to a chair, not a comfortable one, naturally, but a low stool with uneven legs. There are no windows, no food, no warmth. Just you, the magistrate, a scribe with ink-stained fingers, and a large book that no one ever actually opens. He doesn't ask your name. He announces it, like he's been studying your dossier. You want to ask what's in it, what version of you they've constructed from hearsay and herb jars, but you don't speak unless prompted. You understand instinctively that everything you say here will be turned into evidence, bent, trimmed, and polished until it fits the shape they want. The questions begin simply. Do you believe in God? Do you attend Mass regularly? Do you own any foreign texts? You answer calmly, plainly, without embellishment. You try to sound humble, but not evasive, intelligent, but not prideful, honest, but not too honest. Every answer is a tightrope. Every word feels like stepping onto ice. Then come the stranger questions. Have you ever danced alone under the moonlight? Have animals followed you unprovoked? Have you experienced any unusual dreams, particularly those involving fire, flying, or unfamiliar men? You almost laugh, but you don't. He wouldn't appreciate it. You're not supposed to find this funny. You're supposed to tremble. He leans in. His tone changes. Has anyone in the village wronged you? Do you bear any ill will toward your neighbours? He's not asking out of concern. He's laying the trap. If you say yes, it means motive. If you say no, you're lying. You realise, with a cold, crawling clarity, that there is no correct answer, just different flavours of guilt. Behind him, the scribe writes everything down, every cough, every hesitation. You glance at the page once and see that he's written uncooperative tone next to an answer you thought was perfectly reasonable. You realise your fate might be sealed not by fire or blade, but by handwriting, ink and interpretation. The magistrate begins to ask about your body. Any marks, any scars, any blemishes that might indicate you've been visited? You blink. He clarifies. A mole, a birthmark, a third nipple, anything really that might be considered a witch's teat. You want to ask why God would give such a clear sign to his enemies, but you hold your tongue. You simply say you don't know. You haven't memorized your skin. You've been a little busy surviving. He says you'll be examined, soon, privately, but not gently. You will be looked at like an animal. You wonder if the examiner will be kinder than the goat you nursed through pneumonia. Probably not. Then he asks the final question. Do you confess? not to anything in particular. Just, do you confess? As though confession itself were the goal, not justice, not truth. Just admission, agreement, compliance. You shake your head. He doesn't seem surprised. You are dismissed. But not in the way one is dismissed from a meeting or a chore. You are dismissed the way a fire is stamped out. With finality. With a silent promise that this is not the end. As you walk home, the village watches. Some faces are openly hostile. Others are simply curious. A few are unreadable, perhaps ashamed, perhaps fearful that your fate might one day be theirs. No one speaks to you. No one offers a kind word. The road feels longer than usual. That night, you lie awake in your cold bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling beams, listening for the sound of boots. You expect them every hour. You don't sleep. You barely breathe. Somewhere nearby, your cat meows. You wonder if it knows what's coming. You don't need to wonder long. They come for you before dawn, of course. The hour when light hasn't quite broken, when the birds haven't yet remembered to sing, and when the cold settles deepest into your bones. That's when they knock, not loudly but firmly, as though they already know you're awake. And you are. You've been awake all night, staring at the ceiling, counting your breaths like prayers. You open the door because not opening it is worse. They don't bind your hands, not yet. That would be premature. Instead, they gesture politely, almost formally, the way someone might invite you to dinner, if dinner were a damp chamber with shackles bolted to the wall. You follow them in silence. The air is brittle with frost, your breath blooming in little puffs, as if your body is still trying to protest, even when your voice won't. The village watches from behind shutters and barely cracked doors, their curiosity tucked behind curtains like cowardice wearing lace. They take you to the magistrate's makeshift chamber, once a storehouse, now repurposed for divine justice. It smells of old grain, damp straw, and the kind of iron that comes with intent. In the centre sits a chair you do not want to look at too closely. Around it, tools, arranged neatly, purposefully, as if someone took the time to lay them out, like cutlery at a formal banquet. The magistrate isn't there yet. Instead, you're greeted by his assistant, younger, sharper, more enthusiastic about his work. The sort of man who memorises scripture with the same intensity some boys reserve for swordplay. He tells you in a voice that almost sounds kind that this isn't a punishment. It's just a clarification. They simply want to be sure that you're not a danger, that you're not hiding anything, that your innocence, if it exists, will survive the asking. You don't reply. You don't trust your voice not to betray you, to tremble, to crack, to sound tired in a way they'll interpret as guilt. They begin with questions, strange ones. Have you ever flown through the night sky? Have you communed with spirits? Do animals speak to you in dreams? Have you ever lain with a man who then turned into a beast, or a beast who turned into a man? Do you know the names of any demons personally? You might laugh if not for the way they look at you, not like jesters playing a game, but like surgeons selecting a scalpel. They ask about moles next, or witches' marks as they call them, harmless patches of skin transformed by superstition into proof of dark contracts. They don't care how old the mark is, or whether it's been there since birth. What matters is that it exists, something visible, something they can point to and say, there. Evidence.one of them makes a note on a scroll with a flourish that feels far too satisfied for someone drawing a mole on a sketch of your body. Then they ask about your cat, how long you've had it, whether it listens to you, whether you've ever seen it stare into the distance and hiss, because obviously that means it's seeing spirits. You resist the urge to tell them all cats hiss at nothing, because that won't help. Logic rarely does. Eventually the questions shift tone. They ask if you're willing to confess. You say no. Politely, even. They nod, like they expected this. That's when the tools come out. Not all at once. Just a few at first, like a preview. There's the thumb screws naturally. Small, efficient, terrifyingly personal, a device designed not to kill, but to convince. They describe how it works in detail, as if they're reading a recipe. You imagine what it would feel like: the slow crush of bone and nail, the blood forced out, the loss of sensation, followed by an overload of it. You wonder how many fingers someone can lose before they stop being useful. Then there's the boot, a device where your leg is clamped inside a wooden frame, then filled with wedges and hammered until something gives. Usually, it's the shin. The assistant doesn't demonstrate. He just runs a hand along the edge like he's proud of it, like it's something he built. You wonder if he names them. They show you the ducking stool next, a different flavour of torment. The idea, in theory, is simple. You're tied to a chair, lowered into a river, and observed. If you float, you're guilty. If you sink, you're innocent. Of course, the people in charge of pulling you back up aren't known for their reflexes. The irony, you think, is that drowning might be the least humiliating part. They mention the pricking needle too, a long, thin blade used to search for numb flesh. Witches, they say, have spots on their bodies that don't bleed and don't feel pain. So they poke you, over and over, until you cry or bleed or fail to do either. You wonder what happens if they hit scar tissue, or if the blade is dull, or if they simply decide it didn't behave properly this time. You ask carefully if anyone has ever been found innocent. The assistant smiles. Not guilty, he says, is not the same as innocent, which is not an answer, but you both pretend it is. The magistrate finally arrives. He looks tired, not from remorse, but from repetition. Like he's done this so many times that even cruelty has become a routine. He reviews the notes. He glances at you. He says your name slowly, as if tasting it. Then he tells you this can go one of two ways: cooperation or escalation. You choose neither. You remain still. That annoys him. They don't hurt you today, not physically. Today is about showing you the theatre, about rehearsing the lines you'll eventually say under duress, about helping you understand that the outcome has already been decided. They're just waiting for you to catch up. You're sent home that evening, not free, just temporarily unchained, a brief intermission before Act 2. Your hands shake as you eat what little food you have left. Your cat curls beside you. You try not to cry because you know what they'll say if they see tears. They'll say it's guilt. There is no formal announcement, no ringing bell, no shouted command, just the door opening again, and two men stepping inside, one with a lantern, the other with a rope. You don't fight when they take you. You don't ask where you're going. You already know. If the first visit was the rehearsal, this is the performance. The chamber they place you in is smaller than the last. Stone walls, damp with centuries of other people's fear. A wooden bench that sags under your weight. A single bucket in the corner. The only privacy you're allowed. There is a torch bracketed to the wall that burns too brightly and makes everything feel distant, flickering, unreal. The flame doesn't keep you warm. It just throws your shadow in jagged shapes across the floor, like it's trying to escape your body. You're not told how long you'll be here. That's part of the method. Days bleed into one another. Time slips sideways. You start by counting heartbeats, then footsteps, then the cracks in the wall. Eventually, even that feels pointless. Your body still remembers time, even if your mind doesn't. It remembers that you have not slept, that your stomach growls with a voice louder than your own, that your lips are cracked and peeling, that your bones ache in a way that feels older than you are. The questions come in shifts. A man will enter, ask you the same things they've already asked, then leave. Another will replace him. Sometimes it's the magistrate. Sometimes it's one of the assistants. Once, it's a stranger who never gives his name and never blinks. They sit across from you, clipboard in hand, as if this is an interview and not a slow-motion unravelling. They ask if you're ready to confess. You say no. They ask again. You say nothing. They try being friendly at first. They bring you a cup of water, stale and metallic. They offer you a crust of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon. They speak gently, with phrases like, "We just want to help you, and this doesn't have to be painful." That part is almost funny. It already is. The bench becomes your bed. You don't lie down. They don't let you. Every time your eyes begin to close, someone slams a door or kicks the wall or yells your name like a curse. Sometimes they simply shine the lantern in your face. It's not complicated, this kind of torture. You don't need chains or blades. You just need time. Time and light, and the certainty that no one is coming to stop this. The human mind, you learn, is not a fortress. It's a cheap house in a bad storm. And your roof is leaking. After the second day, or the third, or the fifth, you honestly can't tell. The questions start to change. They no longer ask what you've done. They start telling you what you must have done. They say they have witnesses. They say your neighbour saw you speaking to a bird, and the bird responded. They say a child dreamt of your face and woke up with blood in her sheets. They say a merchant passed by your home and immediately broke a toe. Coincidence, of course, is no longer allowed. You tell them these things are absurd. They say so is witchcraft. They leave you alone again. Hours pass, or minutes. You hallucinate a rat reading scripture. You know it's not real, but you still apologise to it. You start hearing voices behind the stone, soft at first, then louder. Familiar ones, your mother, a midwife you haven't seen in 10 years, a lover whose name you promised to forget. They whisper comfort and blame in equal measure. You laugh once when a mouse scurries across the room. It's not funny, but your laughter is high and strange and cracks in the middle like a dropped plate. You cry after, not because of the mouse, but because you cried at all. The men watching through the slot in the door make a note of it. They call it progress. On what might be the 4th day or the 7th, they bring someone else into the room. A woman you've seen in the village. Not a friend, not quite an enemy. She won't look at you. They stand her across from you and begin to question her loudly, deliberately. They want you to hear. They ask if you ever touched her skin, if you ever gave her a strange tincture, if her husband's death 2 years ago seemed suspicious. She stutters, hesitates. They press her. Eventually she says yes. You never did any of those things, but she says yes anyway. They thank her. They say she's being very brave. After she leaves, they ask you again if you're ready to confess. You almost say yes, not because it's true, but because it would end something. That's the danger of this place. Not that it breaks you, but that it bends you until you start to believe your own fiction. That if you just admit it, the story will stop. You don't sleep. You dream while awake. You see your cat sitting in your lap, though you haven't touched her in days. You hear the wind call your name. You begin to forget the shape of your own house. Your fingers twitch like they're remembering a task you never taught them. You try to hum a song and realise it's a funeral dirge. When they come again, they bring food, better than before. A soft heel of bread, a warm broth. You thank them. Then you realise this too is part of it. They soften you with kindness after carving you with deprivation. They offer comfort only to make your next refusal feel like ingratitude. That night, if it is night, they let you sleep. 1 hour, maybe 2. You wake from a nightmare where you were on fire, only to realise you're freezing. The door opens. A new man steps in. He smiles and asks gently, "Are you ready now?" You think about lying, about telling them what they want, about naming demons you've never met and sins you've never committed, about pointing to a birthmark and calling it a pact. Instead, you say nothing. He sighs, sets down his bag of tools, and says, "We'll try again tomorrow." You don't know when it happens exactly. There's no sharp moment, no single crack that splits the dam. Just a slow erosion, a steady dripping of sleep deprivation, pain, humiliation, and hunger, until the line between truth and fiction blurs so completely that stepping over it feels less like betrayal and more like relief. You've stopped keeping track of time. The days and nights bleed into one another like ink in water. You can't remember the last time you slept properly, or the last time someone spoke your name without suspicion wrapped around it. Your hands don't work the way they used to. The bones ache from being twisted in restraints. Your fingers bend oddly now. You're not sure whether they're sprained, broken, or just exhausted. It doesn't really matter. When they come in this time, they don't bring tools. They don't need them anymore. The tools are inside you now. Cracked bones, starved limbs, a brain soft with fear. You sit upright only because you're afraid to fall again. You speak only when prompted, because silence has consequences. They ask again, and this time you say yes. It's not a loud confession. You don't shout it or weep. You just say it like you're agreeing to bad weather. Yes, you've practiced magic. Yes, you consorted with a dark figure. Sometimes a man, sometimes a beast, sometimes something in between. You gave him offerings. You whispered his name. You signed a book, though you can't say where or when, because they never ask for details that can be verified. They only want the story. The magistrate nods slowly, the way a man does when a plan comes together exactly how he hoped. He doesn't look victorious, just satisfied, like you finally behaved, like the ending was inevitable, and you finally stopped wasting everyone's time. Yeah, they ask more questions now, elaborate ones. Did you fly? Yes. You're not sure why you say it, but the words tumble out before you can stop them. You flew over the treetops, over the church steeple, through the night like a bird on fire. Did you gather in the woods? Of course, with others like you. There was a feast, bread, wine, meat, all of it too rich to be real. So yes, obviously enchanted. Was the devil there? Naturally. Handsome, charming, with a tongue like honey and eyes like coals. You can't remember inventing these details, but there they are, already half-shaped in your mouth. They write it all down. Every lie you tell under pressure becomes ink, becomes record, becomes history. The thing is, this isn't unusual. You're not the first to confess to flying, or dancing with demons, or suckling Satan in the shape of a dog. These stories are already part of the script, handed down from one confession to the next. The witch hunters ask the questions in a way that contains the answer. The accused pick up the rhythm. Everyone is playing a role. This is theatre, and you are the final act. In Germany, they've built entire manuals around this. In France, inquisitors memorize lines like stage performers. In Scotland, they'll sleep deprive you into naming your own children as accomplices. In England, they don't burn you, they hang you, but only after asking which neighbour you cursed and how many times you danced on a Sabbath. And in every village, every language, the result is the same. Confession under duress, written in Latin, quoted later as truth. They want you to name names. That part is coming. You can feel it building. But right now, they're savouring the foundation. They ask if your magic harmed anyone. You pause, then you say yes. The baker's crops failed after you walked by. The blacksmith's daughter took ill after you looked at her funny. Your salves caused fever. Your tea caused nightmares. You invent these sins with the same part of your brain that used to remember birthdays and recipes. That part has rotted now. It grows only poisoned fruit. They nod. They praise your honesty. They call it a spiritual breakthrough. They tell you God can only forgive what is confessed aloud. And now that you've begun, you might as well finish. Because if you stop now, if you hesitate, they will say you were lying the whole time and begin again with the screws and the sleep and the silence. So you keep going. You describe a gathering beneath the full moon. You describe the devil's voice, not as it truly is, because of course it doesn't exist, but as they want to hear it. Sweet and deep, seductive and commanding. You describe being baptized in blood, of turning your back on God, of reciting oaths in languages you don't speak. You talk until your mouth runs dry and your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. They give you water. You don't thank them. You just drink. You understand now how so many others confessed. You used to wonder how anyone could claim such nonsense, how anyone could say they flew or transformed or cursed a neighbour's pigs. But it's not madness, not entirely. It's survival. It's playing the part they've written for you. It's easier to lie than to bleed, easier to confess to fiction than to suffer for reality. No one's ever been burned for flying through the night. But people are burned for refusing to say they did. You remember a woman who once stood here. You don't know her name, only that she refused. She denied everything. She spoke with clarity, with courage. They said her soul must be especially corrupted to resist confession, so they dug deeper. When she screamed, they smiled. When she passed out, they called it the devil's silence. They broke her without a single drop of proof. You tell yourself you're smarter, but the truth is you're just more tired. By the time they stop questioning, your voice is hoarse. Your hands are numb. Your heart feels like it's floating in someone else's chest. They lead you back to your cell, gently now, like you're something precious. Like a penitent returned to the fold. You hear one of them mutter, "See, it's always just a matter of time." You lie down finally on the cold stone floor and close your eyes. It's not sleep, it's something more hollow, more fragile. But for now, it's enough. And somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. You thought the confession would be the end. You told them what they wanted. You spoke the words, however false, with the voice they gave you. But the ending doesn't come. Instead, the questions keep going. And now they want something else. They want others. It's not phrased that way, of course. They call it clarity, resolution. They say with smiles that don't reach their eyes that this evil rarely acts alone. Witches travel in covens after all. They gather in secret. They support each other. No one commits these sins in isolation, not unless they're especially dangerous. And you wouldn't want them to think you're especially dangerous, would you? So they hand you a piece of parchment and a dull quill, and they ask you gently to name names. Your hand trembles, not from fear exactly, or not just fear, but from fatigue. From the weight of it, the quill scratches softly, like a whisper across the skin. The parchment seems impossibly white, clean. You stare at it for so long your eyes blur, and still, you write nothing. They don't push, not yet. They tell you to take your time, to search your soul, to remember anyone who ever seemed unusual, anyone who might have led you down this path, anyone you may have seen speaking to animals, or brewing things without clear purpose, or walking the wrong road at the wrong hour. It doesn't have to be solid proof. They're not unreasonable, just a suspicion, a memory, a feeling. At first you refuse. You tell them you acted alone, that your crimes, such as they are, began and ended with you. They frown. The room goes quiet. The air cools, as if someone opened a door you can't see. They say, very calmly, that this is not believable, that your refusal to cooperate undermines your confession, that it complicates things. And so, again, the pressure begins. They remove your food, they shorten your sleep, they bring back the endless questions, the hot light, the long silences meant to scrape your nerves raw. They suggest you're protecting someone, that you've made a pact deeper than even you understand, that if you won't name others, you must be one of the leaders. Eventually, you break again, not with a scream, not with a grand betrayal, just a single name spoken so softly it barely counts as sound. Your neighbour. She's old, harsh, solitary. The village already dislikes her. She's refused church offerings before, and once threatened to curse the miller when he underpaid her for wool. No one will be surprised. In fact, it might almost comfort them to know they were right to be wary. They nod. They write her name down carefully. The assistant underlines it. The magistrate looks pleased, or as close to pleased as a man like him can look. They ask for more. You give them your sister. Not the one who died, the other, the quiet one, who never married, who reads more than she speaks. You think, or rather, you hope, she'll be able to talk her way out of it. She's always been clever, and you're not saying she is a witch, just that maybe she knew something. Maybe she should have known something. Maybe she turned a blind eye. Next, they ask about the midwife. Your voice catches. She saved your baby. She held your hand while you screamed, wiped your brow, and whispered that it was okay to be afraid. But they mention her name already, unprompted. Say she's been accused elsewhere. Say they've long suspected her. They just need confirmation. So you nod. You don't cry. Not then. Not later. Your tears dried up days ago. Or maybe weeks. You can't remember the last time you wept without consequence. Instead, you sit there, numb, as your own handwriting becomes another person's death sentence. You're not alone in this. The record, the real ones, not the ones they're scribbling around you now, show how this always happens. The confessions grow. The accusations spread. In places like Würzburg and Bamberg, hundreds were named, tried, executed. Children named parents, neighbours named rivals. Entire families crumbled from a single whisper. It was never just one witch. The system couldn't sustain itself on single sacrifices. They need a harvest. And you, broken thing that you are, help them reap it. It doesn't matter that the names you gave weren't guilty. It doesn't even matter that you didn't mean it. What matters is that you said it, that you fed the flame, that you turned the wheel forward. You hear, later, that your neighbour was taken from her home at dawn, that she shouted curses as they pulled her from her bed, that she spit at the magistrate, that she bit one of the guards. You wonder if that will be counted as proof. Probably. Everything is. You ask softly if your sister's all right. They don't answer. You never ask about the midwife. You try to tell yourself you had no choice, that it was you or them, that the system was built to devour and you were just too tired to outrun it. But that doesn't stop the dreams. When you do sleep, it's shallow and stuttering. You dream of twisted faces, of reaching hands, of 3 women standing in the corner of your cell, their mouths sewn shut, eyes full of smoke. The next time the magistrate sees you, he calls you cooperative. He says you've been helpful, that you've begun your redemption. You want to ask if redemption still applies when it's built on betrayal, but instead you lower your eyes and nod. They call it a trial, but that's generous. A trial implies fairness, evidence, the possibility, however slim, that you might walk away. What you're given is something else entirely. It's theatre with a body count, a ritual performance where everyone already knows the ending, and the only suspense is in whether your hands will shake too much to hold yourself upright. The hall is freezing. You can see your breath in the air, curling like smoke from a snuffed-out candle. The stone walls weep with damp. Rows of townspeople line the edges, forced into silence by the occasion, but humming with anticipation all the same. You recognise most of them, people you bought bread from, traded yarn with, shared quiet words on summer evenings. None of them look at you now. They stare past you, as though you're already dead. You're given no lawyer. That would imply you deserve a defence. Instead, you're told to speak for yourself, though not too loudly, not too confidently, and never in a way that might suggest you question the authority of the men judging you. 3 judges sit at the front, cloaked in dark robes, faces drawn as if this grim duty has aged them years. Don't let that fool you. They've volunteered. The lead judge opens with a prayer, followed by a lengthy reading from scripture. The usual passages: "Suffer not a witch to live. Thou shalt not permit sorcery among thy people." Words pulled from the book like stones from a river, jagged and worn down from centuries of use. He misquotes a few, but no one corrects him. The purpose isn't accuracy, it's mood. Then comes the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, a book written nearly 200 years ago by men who feared women more than the devil himself. They treat it like gospel. They quote it at length. You're reminded that women are more impressionable, more deceitful, more carnal, and thus more prone to witchcraft. You are in short biologically guilty. They present the confession next. Your own words, scribbled down by someone else, reshaped and rephrased until they no longer resemble anything you actually said. They read them aloud, dramatically, for the benefit of the room. The part where you flew is met with murmurs. The part where you named others gets nods. The part where you consorted with demons. Well, of course you did. What else would explain a woman living alone and thinking for herself? You try to speak. You try to explain that you are starved, sleep-deprived, beaten, that your hands don't work properly because of their clarifying questions. You begin to say that none of it was real, but the judge slams a gavel before you finish. He warns you not to blaspheme, not to undermine your own salvation. You realize that denying the confession only makes things worse. It's considered rebellion, pride, a refusal to repent. They bring in witnesses. One says you looked at her baby, and 2 days later, the child fell ill. Another says you sold her a salve that smelled strange. A third swears your cat stared at him once, and he had nightmares for a week. No one presents proof. No one asks for it. Proof is unnecessary when fear is present. And there's plenty of fear in the room. Fear of illness, fear of hunger, fear of the unexplained. You're just the shape they've given it. Someone produces a vial of something you supposedly brewed. It's cloudy, thick, with a faint herbal scent. You know what it is, an old remedy for cough. Thyme, garlic, vinegar. You've made it for years, but here, in this room, under these eyes, it might as well be poison. They pass it around like a relic. The assistant sniffs it, recoils, and makes a note. The audience leans back, gasping. They ask about the mark on your shoulder, the one you've had since childhood. It is, obviously, a witch's teat. They describe what might have fed from it. You feel yourself leave your body briefly as they debate in solemn voices whether it was a toad or a demon disguised as a raven. The idea that this is being discussed with such seriousness almost makes you laugh. You don't. Laughter is another kind of guilt. Your sister is brought in. She doesn't speak. They don't let her. She looks thinner than you remember. Her wrists are bound. She doesn't look at you. The crowd stares at her, as though your guilt might be contagious. They ask you again if you wish to recant your confession. You realize this is a trap. If you say yes, they will claim you're unrepentant. If you say no, they will still find you guilty, but perhaps call it mercy. You hesitate, and they call that hesitation spiritual confusion, which is a kind of confession too. Eventually, the verdict is announced. Guilty. No one looks surprised. The crowd doesn't cheer. This isn't that kind of execution, but there's a palpable release in the room. Relief, a communal exhale. The witch has been named. The ritual is complete. Now the town can return to its business, free of the invisible threat they invented. The judges don't look at you when they pass the sentence. They just read it aloud. Death naturally. Method to be determined. Date forthcoming. May God have mercy on your soul. You're led from the room in silence. Outside, the sun is shining. It feels wrong. You squint against it, as though the light itself has turned hostile. You're returned to your cell, where a fresh candle waits, a small mercy, or perhaps just another way to ensure you don't die before they're ready. You sit on the stone floor, back against the wall, hands useless in your lap. The crowd is dispersing outside. You hear children laughing. Someone has already started baking. You think about how many others have stood where you stood. How many names have been read. How many faces blurred by time, smeared by history into the same silhouette. The accused, the condemned, the disposable. And you wonder, absently, whether the next woman they bring in will be someone you knew. You'd hoped, naively, that your sentence would be carried out in silence, that it would happen quickly, quietly, with minimal performance, a formality. But this is 1600s Europe, and justice, when served, must be seen. It must be witnessed, preferably with spectacle, sermon, and snacks. They make a public event of it. The preparations begin the night before. You hear it through the walls, hammering, soaring, raised voices. Someone is building a scaffold, not just for hanging, but for standing, for preaching, for watching. There's no dignity in it, no shame either. It's a civic affair, something between punishment and theatre, with a little festival atmosphere thrown in for good measure. The preacher arrives at dawn. His voice booms across the square, echoing off walls slick with frost. He shouts of sin, of Satan, of the terrible beauty of divine wrath. You're told he travelled from another town just for this, drawn, like so many others, by the scent of blood disguised as righteousness. He doesn't know you, but that doesn't stop him from speaking about your soul, like he's memorised it. You're led from your cell mid-morning. No procession of guards, just two men with blank faces and tired hands. They don't speak. You're given no shoes. The cold bites deep through the soles of your feet as you step onto the dirt. It's muddy in places, frozen in others. The sky is clear. It would be a beautiful day if not for the fact that it's the last one you'll see. The crowd has already gathered. Hundreds, maybe more, some from neighbouring villages drawn by rumours and curiosity. There are children, families, traders who've set up carts along the edge of the square, hawking dried fruit and cider. The baker's wife sells extra loaves, shaped crudely like devils. You spot a little girl gnawing one by the heel. She waves it at you like it's a joke. People jostle for better views. Some climb onto barrels, others shove children onto shoulders. There's no sense of solemnity, no moment of silence. They're excited, they're invested. You're not a woman to them anymore. You're a story, a symbol, a headline. You represent everything they've been taught to fear, and now they get to watch you fall. You're pulled onto the platform. Your legs barely hold. The wood creaks beneath you. Somewhere below, someone jeers. A man yells something obscene. Another throws a turnip. It misses, but not by much. The guards don't react. This is all part of the script. The preacher launches into another speech. You don't hear most of it. You catch phrases here and there. Unclean temptress, enemy within. He gestures at the crowd, and they murmur agreement. You try to find a familiar face. You don't. Or maybe you do, and they look away too quickly to be sure. The magistrate stands off to the side, arms folded. His expression is unreadable. Satisfied, perhaps, or bored. He's done his part. This is just the conclusion. The applause. They ask if you'd like to confess one final time, for the sake of your soul, for the record. You already did, of course, but this is tradition, ceremony. You shake your head. Not out of defiance, just exhaustion. The preacher frowns. He says something about stubbornness, about pride, about the devil clinging to your spine like a leech. The crowd murmurs again, this time angrier. Then come the stones. It starts with the children, naturally. They've been coached for this. A small one lands near your feet. Then another, harder, catches your thigh. You flinch but don't cry out. That would only encourage them. They laugh anyway. You hear a woman scold her son, not for throwing but for missing. Your hands are bound. You can't shield your face. You try to angle away from the worst of it, but they're throwing from all sides now. One hits your shoulder. One hits your hip. One, sharp, jagged, grazes your temple and draws blood. It trickles down into your eye. You blink it away, blinking everything away. Eventually, someone tells them to stop. A hush falls. The executioner steps forward. He's young, uncomfortably young. You wonder how many people he's killed, if he practiced on animals, if he sleeps at night. He avoids your eyes. You're grateful for that. You don't want kindness now. You couldn't bear it. If it's a hanging, they test the rope first. If it's burning, they check the wood. Dry, stacked high, soaked in oil. If it's the sword, they sharpen the blade in front of you, which feels unnecessarily dramatic. You still don't know what it will be. That information isn't for you. Someone shouts a prayer. The crowd joins in. It's loud, chaotic, off-key. You mouth the words anyway, not out of faith, but because they're the only ones you still remember. You try not to cry, not because you think it will matter, but because you want to meet this ending with something like dignity, even if the word has lost all meaning here, even if your dignity has been dragged through mud, scraped raw by rumour and fear and bureaucracy, and finally trampled beneath the feet of villagers, too afraid to admit they enjoy this. You stand there, bleeding, bruised, freezing. The sun is warm on your face, the crowd is smiling, and you are very, very alone. After the spectacle ends, they return you to the cell, not out of mercy, but because the logistics of death take time. Rope must be checked, wood must be dried, paperwork must be signed by men who never touched the fire themselves. You aren't urgent anymore, just scheduled. The cell is colder than you remembered, or maybe you're colder now. Your body doesn't hold heat the way it used to. You sit on the same patch of floor where you sat before, but your limbs are stiff, swollen, bruised. You can't feel your fingers. You try to move them and watch them curl slowly, like strangers obeying a command meant for someone else. You don't know if it's night or day. The tiny window near the ceiling lets in a dim grey light that never seems to change. It could be dawn, it could be dusk. You suspect it's neither. Time doesn't live here anymore. It died with the last woman they left to rot in this corner. You wonder if she's buried nearby. You wonder if you'll be buried at all. No one speaks to you now. The guards bring food in silence, if you can call it food. A wooden bowl of thin broth, a crust of bread so hard it blisters your gums. They slide it through the gap without looking at you. Their eyes stay on the ground. You aren't a person to them anymore. You're a duty, a delay, a question someone else answered. Sometimes you try to speak. You ask what day it is. You ask who else has been accused. You ask if the midwife still lives, if your sister got to tell her side of the story, if the neighbour you named screamed when they came for her. But no one answers. The silence is thick and practiced. It's the same silence they offer to the dying, respectful, but entirely uninterested in comfort. The rats visit more often than the people do. One bold one scurries along the far wall, then vanishes behind a loose stone. You name it after your father, who also used to appear without warning and leave without explanation. Another rat, smaller, quick-footed, chews a hole in the corner of the mattress straw. You think about reaching for it, letting it bite you, just to feel something, but you don't. You're not sure if it would work anymore. You try to remember what day it is, what season, whether the trees outside are blooming or bare, whether the town smells like rain or hay or rotting apples. You used to love autumn. You used to walk just to hear the leaves crunch underfoot. Now you can't remember what leaves feel like between your fingers. You can't remember the last time someone said your name like it meant anything other than guilt. The dreams are worse than the waking. You dream of the fire. Of course you do. You see it clearly, even though it hasn't happened yet. Or maybe because it hasn't. You dream of the sound it will make, the way the wood will crack and sigh. You dream of your skin blackening, of people watching with fascination and relief. You dream that you don't scream. Then you dream that you do. Sometimes you dream of home, but it's not really home. It's wrong in subtle ways. The furniture is in the wrong place. The fire won't light. Your cat is there, but it won't come to you. You call its name, and it turns and walks away. You wake up with a dry mouth and a heavier chest. You don't cry. That part of you dried out weeks ago. The water in your body is reserved for surviving, not grieving. You stare at the wall until it looks back. You watch the candle stub melt slowly. You run your fingers along the edge of the bench and count the splinters. You lose track somewhere around 30. No one comes to say goodbye. Not that you expected it, but part of you, the stubborn, childish part, thought maybe someone would. A friend, a neighbour, even the priest, but no one does. You've been erased from the world before you've even left it. The execution is just a formality. The forgetting has already begun. You wonder if anyone will take your belongings, if they'll argue over your cat, or if she'll simply wander off and become someone else's problem. You wonder if your house will be burned or blessed or boarded up, if the field you tended will go wild, if anyone will remember how well your salve cured fevers, if they'll think about that when their children are sick next winter. You try to write something, not a letter. You know better than that. Just a note to yourself, scratched into the dirt with a splinter. I was here. You cover it before the guard comes in. You don't know why. Instinct maybe, or vanity. You lie down on the straw, curled against the wall, like a child, and try to make peace with a world that never offered you any. The stone is cold against your cheek. Your breath comes shallow and slow. You whisper your name once just to hear it. The cell doesn't echo. You close your eyes and wait for the next knock. The final one. They come for you just after what might be sunrise. Not that you see it, but the light has shifted slightly in the cracks of your cell, and the rats are gone. The guards don't speak. They unlock the door, gesture once and wait. You rise slowly. There's no need to rush. You already know where you're going. They don't bind your wrists. There's no point anymore. If you were going to run, you would have done it long before now, when your legs still obeyed you, and your mind hadn't been hollowed out like old bark. Now you walk without prompting, without resistance, without anything left to resist with. They lead you not to the square, but to a small outbuilding near the edge of the jail. It's quiet, tucked away. You wouldn't have noticed it if you hadn't been brought here. It smells of oil, sweat and steel. Inside, the room is dim and warm, almost cosy if you didn't know what it was used for. The executioner is already there. He looks nothing like you expected. No hood, no mask, no wild eyes or gritted teeth. Just a man. Middle-aged, solidly built. His hands are broad, his movements efficient. His beard is neatly trimmed. His tunic is clean. He could be a blacksmith, a baker, someone's uncle. There's nothing monstrous about him, which, in its own way, is worse. He nods when you enter, not unkindly, not smugly, just as if he's acknowledging your presence. Another appointment, another name on the list. He doesn't seem cruel. He just seems comfortable. Like this is a job he's done too many times to be surprised by anything anymore. He doesn't ask your name. He already knows it. You're told to sit on a bench while preparations are made. You do. Your legs ache from the movement. The executioner doesn't speak to you directly at first. He moves around the room, checking his tools. He lays them out carefully on a cloth. You see a length of rope, a small iron brazier, a cloth hood, and of course, the sword. He sharpens it while talking about the weather. He says the frost will break soon, that the spring melt might come early this year, that the roads will flood if they're not careful. He says the baker's wife is expecting again. He says the harvest was poor last year, but maybe things will turn around. His tone is mild, pleasant, almost cheerful, like he's trying to distract you, or perhaps himself. But you suspect it's just habit. You try not to vomit, you fail. It comes up in a dry heave. You haven't eaten much in days, so it's mostly bile and bitterness. It hits the floor with a soft splash, and for a moment, the room is silent, except for your ragged breathing. The executioner doesn't flinch. He sets down the whetstone, walks over, and hands you a cloth without comment. Just holds it out like a handkerchief to a coughing friend. You take it. You wipe your mouth. You want to speak, to say something, anything, but the words crawl up your throat and die behind your teeth. He doesn't seem to expect conversation. That's probably for the best. He crouches in front of you and inspects your face, not cruelly, not even judgmentally, just to see if you're lucid, if you're calm enough to stand. He doesn't ask if you're ready. That would imply choice. He explains how it will go. If you've been sentenced to hanging, he'll ensure the knot is tied properly. He says he checks the spine placement himself, says he doesn't trust the younger assistants anymore. If it's burning, he says, the flames will be quick if the wind holds. If it's the sword, and you get the feeling that this time it is, he'll ask you to kneel. He'll place your hair forward to clear the back of your neck. He'll ask you to stay still. That's the hardest part, he says. People flinch, people pray, people beg. He doesn't tell you not to beg. He just says it makes the cut harder. You nod. Or maybe you just stop shaking. Either way, he seems satisfied. He stands, returns to the blade, and begins oiling it now. The steel gleams in the firelight. It's beautiful, in the way that dangerous things often are. He hums while he works, a soft tune, wordless, familiar, in a way you can't quite place. A lullaby, maybe. Something from a childhood neither of you have mentioned. You wonder what he dreams about, if he dreams at all. Another guard enters, nods. The time has come. The executioner wraps the blade, tucks the tools back into their places. He moves with the care of someone preparing a meal or setting a table. You think briefly of how long it's been since you sat at a table, since you were offered a plate and a smile, since you were something other than condemned. He gestures to the door. This is it. You stand. He walks behind you, close enough that you can hear his breath but not feel it. He's done this before, hundreds of times, maybe more. You are not special. You are not different. You are just one more name, one more sentence, one more head in a ledger. And as you step into the morning light, the crowd waiting again, the priest beginning another sermon, the noose or sword or flame waiting like an old friend, you realize something else. You are never going to be saved. They don't tell you until the last moment. Maybe it's to keep you from bracing for it. Maybe it's because at this point, the method doesn't really matter. Whether you're hanged, burned, or beheaded, the destination is the same. The only difference is how long the crowd has to watch you die. The rope is already hanging when you step onto the platform, so that seems to answer the question. Thick, coarse, tied with a practiced knot that swings gently in the morning breeze. You focus on the knot because it's something to look at, something that isn't a sea of staring faces, or the preacher with his red, furious mouth. You're guided to the centre of the platform. Your legs don't stumble, not exactly, but they move with the dull resistance of someone already leaving their body. The executioner's hand is steady on your arm, not cruel, not kind, just firm. He helps you up the last step. You don't thank him. The preacher is still talking. You stopped listening several minutes ago, somewhere between cleansing fire and unholy temptress. The crowd murmurs along, some nodding, some praying. A few weep, not for you, but for what you represent, for the evil they believe they've rooted out. You are a victory, a parable, an ending. They ask if you have any final words. You don't answer, not because you have nothing to say, but because there's no one left to say it to. If it's the rope, you're told to keep your hands still, to breathe evenly, to drop your weight quickly, so the neck breaks clean. You nod, as if you'll be able to control any of that once you fall. The irony is almost funny. They pull the hood over your face. It smells of ash, oil, and the last person who wore it. You go blind. The world narrows to breath and cloth, and the rough pressure of rope against your neck. You hear the murmurs grow quiet. You hear the wood groan beneath your feet. You hear the priest say, "May God receive your soul," and the lever clunk. Then there's nothing, but let's say it wasn't the rope. Let's say it's the fire. You're tied to the post, hands bound behind you, knees shaking, the wood stacked in a perfect, thoughtful pyramid, dried in advance, soaked in pitch, prepared with a diligence that no one ever gave to saving you. The executioner steps away. The torch is passed. The crowd leans forward. Children are lifted onto shoulders. This is the part they remember. The flame catches quickly. You feel it first at your feet. Heat, then pain, then something beyond pain. It climbs fast. Fire is not a patient thing. Your dress ignites like it was built for it. Which it was. Most women's clothing is. It wraps around your legs, your waist, your ribs. You open your mouth, But the smoke gets there first. You don't scream. Not because you're brave, but because you can't. Your throat burns shut before your voice can escape. Your eyes boil. Your skin cracks. Your world is reduced to white heat and choked silence. Eventually, your body stops moving. They'll say you went peacefully. Or let's imagine the sword. You're told to kneel. You do. The ground is cold even through your dress. Your knees find splinters. The executioner steps behind you. You hear him draw the blade. It sings when it leaves the scabbard. A high, final sound that cuts through the morning like a bird call. He says to be still. You try. He places a hand on your shoulder. You close your eyes. There is a sharp, hot crack at the base of your skull. Then blackness. You don't feel the second swing. If there is one. The crowd cheers or prays or turns to leave before the body hits the platform. The preacher shouts something about righteousness. Someone nearby sells meat pies. Someone else laughs. It doesn't matter how you died. What matters is that it happened in public. That it happened with witnesses. That it ended the story cleanly, efficiently, in a way that made everyone else feel a little safer, a little holier, a little more certain that the devil was not in them, only in you. The body, your body, is removed quickly. No one wants to linger on the mess, the blood, the smell, the crackling sound that lingers long after the fire's out. You're disposed of with the same practicality they bring to harvesting grain or clearing snow. Not disrespectfully, just without meaning. The record will state your name, your crime, your method of death, the confession likely cleaned up, trimmed of its rougher edges. A few phrases of remorse may be added, a few flourishes of wickedness to make the story sharper. Years from now, someone will find the record and read it aloud in a different language. They will shake their head, marvel at how backward things were. They will not say your name with grief, only curiosity. You die in pain, in public, in total silence, and the world continues without you. It doesn't take long for them to forget you. Your name is spoken a few more times that week, whispered at wells, murmured during church, passed between neighbours over loaves of bread. But already, it's becoming detached from you. Already, it's less about who you were and more about what happened. You're not a person in their stories anymore. You're a warning. By the time the next frost settles, someone else is living in your house. They sweep the floor. They patch the roof. They clear your garden and shake their heads at the strange things you planted. Too many herbs, too few flowers. They might leave the cat alone, or they might chase her off with a broom. Either way, she moves on. She's smart, smarter than you were. The preacher gives a sermon the following Sunday, not about you, but about temptation in general. He says the devil is subtle. That evil hides behind smiling faces and clever hands. He doesn't mention your name, but everyone knows what he means. They nod, pious and satisfied, and go home for stew. The children still talk about the fire. Not in fear, in excitement. They imitate the way you stood, how you didn't cry out, how the rope swayed, how the sword gleamed, how the flames climbed. Some of them draw it in the dirt with sticks. A few play witch trial behind the mill, taking turns accusing each other, tying each other up with bits of twine, pushing each other off rocks to see who floats. The adults don't stop them. Maybe they think it's healthy, educational. Within a year, the space where you died becomes just another part of the town. A square, a corner, a place where people walk their goats or buy onions. A spot of scorched earth, scrubbed clean and repurposed. The ashes washed away in the rain. The memory softened until it no longer pricks. But the story remains. Not yours exactly. Not the truth of it. Just the shape of it. The outline. A woman. Alone. Accused. Condemned. Someone different. Someone difficult. Someone dangerous. Even if only because she was inconvenient. The village forgets your face, but it remembers the template. And that's what lasts. Because centuries pass and people stop believing in witches, but not in scapegoats. They invent new names for the same fear. Heretic, harlot, hysteric, criminal, deviant, threat. They speak of justice with the same conviction. They pass laws with the same language. They tighten their grip and call it righteousness. They do not always use fire. Sometimes they use silence, poverty, isolation, shackles made of policy instead of rope. The executioner wears a suit now. The priest holds a microphone. The crowd watches from behind screens, clicks their approval, moves on to the next, and still the whisper remains. You hear it in the way people say, "She brought it on herself," in the way they laugh nervously at women who speak too sharply, in the way they ask, "Why didn't she just leave?" Or, "What was she wearing?" In the way someone says, "Well, I heard she was difficult," and the room nods, because difficult women are always the first to burn. Your story, your real story, is buried under layers of invention. Your name is lost, but your role is eternal. You are every woman who refused to bow, who walked alone, who said no too many times. You are every healer who dared to know more than a man, every widow who didn't remarry, every midwife, every teacher, every girl with a book and a voice and a spine. You are not remembered, not properly, but you are echoed. Sometimes a historian finds your confession in a dusty archive, Latin on parchment, ink faded brown. They frown at the language, note the absurdity. They write a footnote about early modern superstition. They do not wonder what your voice sounded like. They do not know you sang when you cooked, that you loved storms, that you once tried to keep a journal, though the pages were stolen and used for kindling. They study you like a symptom, not a person, but elsewhere sometimes someone wonders. A young girl hears the word witch and doesn't flinch. She asks questions. She reads too much. She speaks too loudly. She recognizes something in the margins of history that looks like her. She sees the gaps where people like you should be, and in that space, something lives. You're forgotten by the town. The stone that marked your death crumbled long ago. Your name, if it was written, is now unreadable. But the injustice still hums in the soil. The wind that moves through that square carries something sharp, something unsettled. People walk over it without noticing, but sometimes they pause. They feel uneasy. They don't know why. You do. It's not justice, it's not vengeance, it's not peace, but it is something. And it is not silence. That's the end of tonight's slow spiral into fear, fire, and fabricated guilt, sleep deprivation, spectral confessions, and the occasional flying accusation. Thanks for sitting in silence with me, even when the crowd wouldn't. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which moment might have broken you. The mouse that made you cry, the executioner humming over his blade, or the part where truth and fiction became the same survival strategy. Sleep well if you can,